Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidil Mursaleen wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Amma ba'du fa'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. سبحان الذي أسرى بعبده ليلا من المسجد الحرام إلى المسجد الأقصى الذي باركنا حوله لنريه من آياتنا إنه هو السميع البصير إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير خلقه محمد وآله وأصحابه وأهل بيته وعترته وبارك وسلم تسليما كثيرا. Respected brothers, sisters, and my dearest children, would like to welcome everyone on the lesson number 32 in the weekly series of Seeratul Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, where we have reached the very important topic of Isra and Miraj. Alhamdulillah, so far we have covered the entire life of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, all the way from Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, before his birth, and then we covered his birth and his childhood, and as he grew up in Makkah Mukarramah, and how he was transferred from one custody to the other after the demise of both of his parents, Bibi Fatima and Hazrat Abdullah, his father, and Bibi Amina radiyallahu anha. All of them, they passed away, and then he was transferred to his uncle. And then after, we found in the last couple of lessons that his uncle also passed away. And this was a very tough year for Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, because in the same year he lost his wife also, Hazrat Bibi Khadija radiallahu ta'ala. So we have covered all this. And then when Abu Lahab, his other uncle, took over the leadership of Quraysh, Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam decided to try Taif and see if there was any luck, and whether they would accept his words. But unfortunately, the people of Taif also gave him very hard time, as we learned. And being very disheartened and helpless situation, he made dua to Allah Ta'ala, he turned to Allah Ta'ala. And this is, what is written in the books, that Allah Ta'ala sent the prophets with two things. One was the invitation towards the greatness of Allah Ta'ala, to make people recognize Allah, the Creator. And the second thing was the power of dua, that whenever they faced any difficulties, they would make dua. And all the prophets, they have used these, they did the invitation and then they made the dua. Like Noah alayhi salatu wasalam worked for 950 years. And after that, he turned to Allah Ta'ala that, Ya Allah, they are not listening. And then the storm and the punishment of Allah Ta'ala came. So in the same way, Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, we find that after Taif, despite the angel Jibreel Islam came and the angel of mountain came, and they said, we are waiting for your dua and your command and your order. And here Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, instead of asking Allah Ta'ala to punish these people, he showed that he was Rahmatul lil Alameen. He was a true mercy to the mankind, as Allah Ta'ala has described him in the Quran. And he said to the angels, and he turned to Allah Ta'ala and said, I am hopeful that inshallah their families or generations later on, they will inshallah follow my way, and which is what happened in the end, as we discovered. So after that, Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam then this is the turning point, if you like, that this his sacrifices mounted and reached the height which Allah Ta'ala probably has a level, and then Allah Ta'ala opened the doors of hidayat and guidance now. And so the first thing which happened after this dua, he was resting in this garden of Shaiba and Utba, where the first person came, and this slave Addas, and he accepted Islam. So this is the door opening now of hidayat Allah Ta'ala is showing. And then he came back, we find, and on the way at the valley of Nakhla, now Allah Ta'ala opened the doors of the other makhluk, the jinnat, they came forward and they became Muslim. And then, the full jinnat, we find that Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam gave them the instructions and so on. And then now, after that, the biggest event now, or the biggest honor, Allah Ta'ala has now taken the Prophet through this great sacrifice and difficult levels, and he has passed all the way through. And now Allah Ta'ala is now honoring him. And the biggest honor or the biggest miracle he received was this Isra and Miraj, this great journey which Allah Ta'ala gave him, and in fact, invited him. Allah Ta'ala is actually inviting the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the only personality in the humanity or in his creation who ever went as close as it has been described in the Quran. No one has reached that reached that closeness to Allah Ta'ala than Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Allah Ta'ala honored him, And incidentally, if we just compare that, Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, for example, when Allah Ta'ala decided to give him the prophethood, and he was on the mountain, and he made a request. Quran is telling us that, Ya Allah, I want to see you, right? And Allah Ta'ala said to Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, you cannot see me. You don't have the power to see me, right? And Musa alayhi salam, being the prophet he insisted, Ya Allah, I want to see you. So in the end, Allah Ta'ala said, okay, Musa, turn your face. And then Allah Ta'ala sent a very tiny glimpse, of himself, of his tajalli, of his light and nur on the mountain, Tur. And because of that, the mountain burnt completely into ashes, right? And Musa alayhi salam, even though he was not facing directly, he was facing opposite. Because of this great tajalli and light and nur, he fainted. So, and here we find that Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Allah Ta'ala is sending him an invitation, and he has been asked to come. And he goes, according to the Surah Najm, which we will come in later on, where Allah Ta'ala is defining, وَالنَّجْمِ إِذَا هَوَى مَا ضَلَّ صَاحِبُكُمْ وَمَا غَوَى وَمَا يَنْطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَى إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَى عَلَّمَهُ شَدِيدُ الْقُوَى. All the way, and then ثم دنا فتدلى فكان قاب قوسين أو أدنى. He came, he's coming closer to Allah Ta'ala. According to one riwayat, Mufassirin have written that Allah Ta'ala has invited him and Allah Ta'ala has brought him so close to him. So this is, you know, the honor Allah Ta'ala is giving to Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And you know, this Isra and Miraj, as I mentioned in the last lesson, it is actually, this journey is two parts. One part is called the Isra, the travel in the night, and this is, you know, in itself is a huge journey, because from Makkatul Mukarramah he traveled to Jerusalem, you know, Masjid Aqsa, the masjid. In fact, you know, one of the Sahabi asked Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam one time, which is the first masjid in the world? And of course, Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam replied, this is, you know, Masjid Haram, you know, the Kaaba, where the Kaabatullah is, that's the first masjid in the world which was built. Then he said, which is the second masjid in the world? And the second masjid in the world is Masjid Aqsa, which was built by Sulaiman alayhi salatu wasalam. So this travel and the distance between them, you know, it used to take the Arabs who were going for business almost a month's travel, you know, approximately, I would say around 1,500 kilometers or 1,000 miles away, right? This is like, you know, if you are in England, well, in fact, the whole UK is probably around 700 miles from one end to the other, 700-800 miles. So, and from Makkah to Jerusalem is more than that, you know, around 980 miles or something like that, I think. So the journey, Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is traveling within the night. You know, Hani radiallahu anha, she is narrating this hadith and saying that Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was with me in that night. And Hani is the daughter of Abu Talib, and she said that he was with me, and he left in the night, and then we prayed the Fajr namaz in the morning. He was back, you know, so within, and some riwayat are mentioning that you know, the bed was still warm. So this miracle is happening to Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. The bed is still warm by the time he goes and undertakes this huge journey, you know, 1,000 miles away, first of all, on this Buraq, as we mentioned in the last lesson. And then from there, a lift was brought, and now he's traveling through the heavens. Right? So all this is happening within, you know, if you like, it is in the other dimension now. He's in the other dimension, and the time has stopped. Right? Now, so first thing we need to understand that, like many of the people, obviously it was something unbelievable. It cannot happen, you know. And so there are many riwayat where and ulama and mufassirin have also discussed this, that whether this thing happened as a dream or in real. And the majority have come to the opinion that it actually happened in real life. You know, where Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam actually traveled with his ruh and with his body, you know, all the way. Because if it was just a dream, then there's nothing very special about it. So this thing actually happened to Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and this was something which was unbelievable. You know. But you know, many riwayat, like one of the riwayat, which in fact you know, is mentioned, that the Roman emperor Caesar or Caesar or whatever they called them in those days. So he when he heard about the Prophet sallallahu, in fact, the letter was brought. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam started writing letters, and one of the Sahabi, Hazrat Dahiya radiallahu ta'ala an, he actually brought the letter where there was an invitation of Islam, and Qaisar, this was presented to the emperor and it was read out, and Qaisar was surprised to hear this, and he said that uh, he said to his great ministers and clergies, or the padris, or those people who were the scholars of the of the Christianity, that bring the Bible and let us look at the original Bible. Let us look at if there is any mention about, and they find there is some mention, and then they said, well, in order to confirm, let us find, because usually from Makkah to their countries, Arabs were coming for tijarat, for business. So they said, go and look if there is any group traveling in our country from Arab, and bring them. So it just so happened that Abu Sufyan, who obviously was the cousin of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he had not accepted Islam at that point, and in fact he was an enemy of Islam at that time, and he was traveling with a group for business. So he came, he was brought, and Caesar, the emperor, said to him that, look, is there anyone in your group close to this person who is claiming that he's a prophet? So he said, yes, I'm the closest. So he said, well, I'm going to ask you some questions and make sure you are honest. If you are not honest, I will behead you. So he gave him. So now Abu Sufyan, obviously, even though he was reluctant to say any truth about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was forced to give the true answers. He asked several questions, which are obviously, I don't want to go into those. We've already, maybe we can cover that some other time. But then Abu Sufyan, when he found that Caesar was comparing them to his Injil, the Bible, and saying it is the truth, what you're saying is correct. So now he was a bit surprised, and he thought to himself that if the Roman Empire comes into Islam, then this will be the doom for all of us. The Arab is gone, basically, if the empire accepts it. So now he said, what shall I do? So he said, well, there is one more thing I'll tell you. And his intention was that to tell him about it so that he will say it is impossible. And he started mentioning about the Miraj, Isra and Miraj, right? So, with the intention that when the emperor will hear this, he will definitely refuse. He said, well, of course, this is not true. So he said that, this person, there's one more thing I would like to just let you know, that he is claiming that he traveled from Makkah to Jerusalem. And of course, Jerusalem was under his jurisdiction, the emperor's jurisdiction. So he said that he's traveled in one night from Makkah to Jerusalem, and then to the heavens, and came back. So now the emperor turned to his the ministers or the scholars of Injil, and he said, is there anyone who can say anything about this? This obviously is this claim doesn't make any sense, right? And it's impossible. So one of the scholars there, whose name in fact in the tafsir has been mentioned, Elia, he was one of the scholars. He said that I would like to say a few things, and then he said that I was present in Jerusalem. In fact, I was appointed at that time as an imam and caretaker of the masjid, of Masjid al-Aqsa at that time, when this incident happened. And the reason why I remember this, and he started telling that, and we found in the last lesson that Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam traveled in the Buraq, and then he tied this Buraq, this means of transport, which was described as something which was larger than a mule and smaller than a donkey, right? So, or the other way, in fact, uh, so he traveled and he tied this, and this thing was traveling at the speed of lightning. So he tied it at certain spot in front of the Baitul Muqaddas, the Masjid Aqsa, and then he entered, right? So obviously he is describing an incident a night before this is, or the night which is this happening. On the same night when it is about to happen, he said that I finished my duties in the Masjid al-Aqsa, and then my responsibility was to make sure, because of the decoration and everything, so many precious things were present in the Masjid, Masjid al-Aqsa, that I had to make sure that it was completely locked, all the doors were closed. And so I started closing all the doors, and then I came to this door, one door, which I pushed and pushed, and I couldn't close it. There was no way I could close this door. And now I was a bit concerned, because it was my responsibility. If anything was stolen from the masjid, then it would have come down on me. So I then called the people who built this door in the night. This is the night before, when Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is about to come. And they came and they looked at everything, and in those days probably there were huge doors, and they said, well, the wall which is on top of this door, it looks like it has come down a little bit and is putting pressure on this door. That's why we can't close it, and there's no way we can shut this door today. And of course, in order to fix this problem, we will have to start tomorrow morning. So we'll have to just leave it like this. So this scholar is saying, Elia, that I was concerned. He said, I can't leave this door open like this. So he decided to sleep there. And he said that just to make sure that no one enters here, he went to sleep, and he said that I slept, and then I don't know what happened, but the next morning when I woke up and I looked at the door, it just closed very easily, as if there was no problem at all. And I was shocked and surprised. And I then called the people also, because I had called, the people had already seen that, in fact, all of them tried to push this door, they couldn't close it. And now it just was very easily, I was able to shut it. So I called the people and I said, look what has happened. And then I found a spot there where, as if there was an animal tied here. Right? So he described this to the Roman emperor. So that's one of the things mentioned in the riwayat, which confirms, that's one thing, that definitely the Miraj, this incident of travel in the night from Makkah to Baitul Muqaddas really happened, right? Or he came to Masjid Aqsa. And secondly, Hani radiallahu anha, she is narrating, Ibn Ishaq has written this in his book of Seeratul Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that when he mentioned this to the kuffar and mushrikeen, they said, prove it. If you are claiming this, then okay, tell us if there is anything. So Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam mentioned two things. He said that as I was traveling, I found that the group of our group of Arabs, they were traveling, and I saw that they had lost their camel, and I could see their camel, and I shouted that, look, you are looking for your camel, it's there. and this incident happened. And on the way back, he says that I found there was a group of people who are coming back into Makkah, and when I was coming, I saw them at this spot, which was a few, maybe a few mile away from Tan'im or near Makkah. So, so by now, hopefully by morning, they will be in Makkah, this group. And so these two incidents he has mentioned, and Ibn Ishaq has written this. The people of the Mushrikeen, they rushed, first of all, to find this group who was approaching, and they found him, that they had already arrived in the morning. And they asked that, did you see anything or extraordinary? And they confirmed it, that yes, we saw the Prophet. And what actually happened was Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam stopped at this point in their group. There was, and wanted to drink some water. So there was a container there which had water in it, and he drank the water, and he put the lid on top of this container. And they said that they told the mushrikeen that we had kept the water, and when we looked at it in the morning, there was no water there. So we were a bit surprised what happened to the water, suddenly disappeared. So these incidents, a couple of them have been mentioned in the riwayat, which is telling us that definitely, and most of the ulama have the consensus that definitely the incident of Isra and Miraj definitely happened, right? So, and then the third thing which to confirm this is Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala. Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala, when he, in the morning when he was coming, someone, the mushrikeen, in fact, Abu Jahl actually went to him and said that now I can convert him back. In fact, some of the new Muslims, they actually were, after hearing this ridiculous, as they thought it was, story, they turned back. They became murtad again, and they left the Islam. So he came, and with this intention to Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala, he said, if someone tells you that if someone has traveled in the night, in one night, from Makkah to Jerusalem, and then from Jerusalem to the heavens, would you believe? He said, definitely, I will never believe some story like this. He said, well, your prophet is saying this. And look, he's sitting there and he's telling the people in the haram. So Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala, he said, if he's saying it, then definitely it must have happened. He confirmed it. And then he came to Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and he said, Ya Rasulullah Sallam, I heard this. Are you saying something like this? He said, yes, Abu Bakr, I traveled from Makkah. So Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala, he said, Ya Rasulullah Sallam, you tell me about Jerusalem and Masjid Aqsa, because I have been there myself in the past, right? So he had already traveled, probably because of business or something. So he said, tell me, describe to me what you saw. So in one riwayat, it's mentioned that Allah Ta'ala opened the entire Jerusalem and Masjid Aqsa in front of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam started describing different things, that this is here and this is there, and he's looking at it and is telling Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala. And Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala, he is hearing this and he's saying, he's confirming it. He said, definitely what you are saying is absolutely right, because I have been there myself. And what you are saying, that these things, definitely they are there, right? So that's why this is when Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam gave Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala the title Siddiq, the truthful one, the loyal one, who without any doubts accepted the words of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So he became Abu Bakr Siddiq, right? So definitely Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam had this journey all the way from Makkah. The first part was Isra, travel in the night from Makkah to, we covered in the last lesson. And then the second part, where the thing was brought, the lift, some sort of lift, and Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam he traveled to the first heaven, and there he met, the doors were opened after investigation, and then he entered, and there he met Adam alayhi salatu wasalam. Right? This is and Adam alayhi salatu wasalam welcomed him and said, "Welcome, my son, my noble son, and my and righteous prophet and messenger." He greeted him with these words. And of course, we are, because we all come from Adam alayhi salatu wasalam, so he welcomed him. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam now moved to the second heaven. And every heaven, there is a gate there is a guard, and the guard asks, "Who is it? Who is with you?" And then he has to confirm, and then he allows them to enter. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam now moved to the second heaven, and in the second heaven he meets the two prophets. In fact, they are cousin, Yahya alayhi salam and Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. Jesus and John the Baptist, as they call them in the Bible. Right? So he meets them, and they welcome him. Welcome our noble brother and a righteous messenger. They welcome him and they greet him, and then he moves to the third sky, and this is where he meets Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam. Right? And he also again welcomes him. That welcome. Uh, our noble brother and righteous messenger. And then after Yusuf alayhi salam, he moves to the next heaven. Again, the same, the guard is there, and he's traveling through this, and Allah Ta'ala is he's meeting these different prophets in the different levels. So the fourth heaven, he meets Idris alayhi salatu wasalam. And in the fifth heaven, he meets Harun alayhi salatu wasalam. And in the sixth heaven, now he meets Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. Right? So all of the five, they, from the second to the fifth, they greet him as our noble brother and our righteous messenger. And now Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, of course, his age was probably a lot, and I think he lived probably 150 plus years, right? So Musa alayhi salam, he meets Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he calls him Ya Ghulam, right? Welcome, Ya Ghulam. Ya Ghulam, in fact, means oh young man, right? And of course, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam being maybe at the age of about 50, around 50 plus, compared to 150, he looks like a young man to him. So he greets him that, oh young man, welcome, and a righteous messenger. And he goes past that, and then now the seventh heaven, right? And the seventh heaven, as he enters, he sees, Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam there. And of course, Ibrahim alayhi salam is the forefather. Again, he greets him as, oh my righteous son and noble son and a messenger, welcome. And the other thing which he sees there on the seventh heaven is the Baitul Mamur, right? Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam is resting against this Baitul Mamur, and Baitul Mamur is mentioned in the ahadith. In fact, there's a whole Quran surah about that. So I will go in detail maybe later on. But just to mention that, just briefly, in the hadith is mentioned Baitul Mamur is directly above the Kaaba. There is another Kaaba, in fact, for the people of the heavens. And it is mentioned about that it is above the seventh heaven, and there also tawaf is continuously going on. And it's mentioned that every day 70,000 angels, they perform the tawaf, and then they leave, and they will not get a chance to come back and do a second tawaf until the day of judgment. Right? So the next day, another 70,000. So every day, 70,000 new angels are doing the tawaf of that, and Rasulullah Sallallahu sees all that, and the Baitul Mamur is there. Baitul Mamur, actually it means a house which is frequently visited, frequented. So of course, because every day 70,000 angels are coming around and then leaving. 70,000 more are coming and leaving. So he meets there, and now from there, you know, his journey starts, right? And towards meeting Allah Ta'ala, right? So now from there, his next spot is the Sidratul Muntaha, right? This is the place where, which has been described, where probably the arsh of Allah Ta'ala, the throne of Allah Ta'ala is there. But before they reach that level, they come to a boundary, and this boundary is the last spot for Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam. Now no one can enter this boundary. No one is allowed. Even the most noblest angel, the highest angel, Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam, who actually, in fact, he comes in his real form at this point, Sidratul Muntaha, right? And inshallah, we will have to cover this, inshallah. Now the time is up, and now it's getting more interesting, because this is where in Surah Najm Allah Ta'ala is describing him, and ulama has given a couple of interpretation here of how, when he sees Jibreel alayhi salam, he sees him in real life, and then of course he goes on further and to meet Allah Ta'ala, and it's interesting. And so now, in different heavens, Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has met these different prophets who have come, and of course Isa alayhi salam was important because he is going to come back, right? And in fact, the other thing mentioned about, like Musa alayhi salatu salam also has been mentioned, that Musa alayhi salatu salam was also wishing that I wish I was the prophet of this ummah, this last ummah, that I would have received this honor. But Allah Ta'ala had already decided to give this honor to our beloved Prophet Muhammadur Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So this incident of Isra and Miraj is after, as I mentioned in the last lesson, according to most of the riwayat which are mentioned in Bukhari Sharif and Muslim Sharif, they point to the fact that it happened probably just maybe a year or 1.5 or 2 years before the hijrat of Medina Munawwara. It definitely, because one of the gifts, as we will learn, Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam received was the 5 times salat, which became fard. And many of the Sahaba, they have mentioned in the riwayat that the fardiyat, the fact that the salat became compulsory, it happened after the demise of Hazrat Khadija radiallahu anha. So definitely Miraj must have happened after that. So, according to most of the ulama and mufassirin, wallahu alam, maybe around 1.5, 2 years before the hijrat of Medina Munawwara. Anyway, whenever it happened, definitely it happened. It is mentioned in the Quran. It is mentioned in authentic Bukhari Sharif and Muslim authentic hadith, Sahih hadith are there to confirm that Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, although there is a big discussion whether it was a dream or in real life, but majority are saying that definitely it happened, and Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam actually traveled, and this honor Allah Ta'ala gave him to invite him, and he visited Allah Ta'ala, and then the conversation took place with him and Allah Ta'ala. Inshallah, we'll go into detail in the next lesson. May Allah Ta'ala open our eyes. You know, one of the things, in fact, I wanted to mention today is about the huge, space which is just before the first heaven. Our solar system itself. You know, how like the with the solar system where all the planets are revolving around the sun, and the sun, how big is the sun? You can the astronomers, they say probably we can fit 1 million earths in the sun to make up the sun, right? So this is how huge the sun is, and it's how far away from here. 93 million miles away, right? This, and this is just one star, and this is our solar system. There are other galaxies after galaxies like this. So, and these are all within the first heaven. Right? Inshallah, maybe we'll go into detail maybe next in the next lesson next week. May Allah Ta'ala accept us, all of us. Keep safe. We are starting the new year. I would like to recommend that, inshallah, let's adopt. We are doing the Seerah of Rasulullah, so let's make some New Year resolution, right? That inshallah we can do uh, some sunnah, which maybe we can try and be steadfast in that, in these sunnah this year, inshallah. So one of them I would recommend is doing the Ayatul Kursi after the first salat. الله لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض من ذا الذي يشفع عنده إلا بإذنه يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم ولا يحيطون بشيء من علمه إلا بما شاء وسع كرسيه السماوات والأرض ولا يؤوده حفظهما وهو العلي العظيم. This is in the hadith is mentioned that nothing can stop a person entering Jannat uh, except death, if a person is reading Ayatul Kursi after every first salat. So let's, inshallah, take this sunnah of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, that after every first salat, we will do the uh, this Ayatul Kursi, inshallah. So this is a very polite way of saying that definitely we have to do the 5 times salat. If we are going to do the Ayatul Kursi after the after the salat, then inshallah we will do the salat also. It'll enable us to be steadfast in our salat also. May Allah give us the ability. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Subhanallahi wa bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك نستغفرك ونتوب إليك نستغفرك ونتوب إليك سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. جزاك الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.